Hi, this is Julie. And before we get started, I want to acknowledge International Women's Day, the difference that women are making all around the world. And I want to honor in particular one woman, Sybrina Fulton, who I had the honor of interviewing just before the holidays in 2018, and the work that she's doing through Circle of Mothers, a healing retreat that supports mothers who've lost a child to gun violence. There's a GoFundMe campaign, and our community has raised over $10,000 so far to send mothers to Sybrina's Circle of Mothers retreat this May. On International Women's Day, at the end of the day, we're going to close that campaign so we can disperse the funds to Sybrina. So if you're listening on International Women's Day, I hope you'll press pause right now. Go take a look at the GoFundMe campaign for Sybrina Fulton's Circle of Mothers. Consider making a contribution of any size, share with your friends. And if you're listening to this later, you can go to the foundation directly and still make your contribution. Thank you so much for honoring women like Sybrina who are making powerful change, building community, bringing healing all around the world. Now onto this special episode. Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and realize that I'm the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms on their own quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself. Come along with me, and you'll find some treasures of your own. Hello, and welcome to this bonus episode of the Mother's Quest podcast, a replay of an interview I had on my friend Anne Ferguson's MamaFuel podcast. In this conversation, Anne turns the tables on me and asks me about how the epic guideposts show up in my life. I'm excited to share this episode with you and use this as an opportunity to share a few announcements about what's happening with Mother's Quest. The podcast has been on a break since the holidays, but today I recorded my first episode of Season 4 with Catherine Winch, who was my second guest on the podcast over 2 years ago. It was a full circle moment for me and a great chance for both of us to reflect on what's changed in our lives since that first conversation. I'm excited to share that episode and officially launch the season on March 21st. In the meantime, there are a few invitations I want to offer to you now. In February, I recorded the first Spark Your Epic Year workshop. It was a chance to intentionally close one chapter and start a new one, done in the form of a virtual hike. The replay and a special Spark Your Epic Year worksheet are available for free and can be used anytime you are ready for a reset. Just follow the links in the show notes to sign up. If you haven't heard my episode with Trayvon Martin's mother, Sybrina Fulton, I hope you'll set aside some time to listen. I also invite you to contribute in any amount meaningful to you to the GoFundMe campaign that came alongside the episode to support Sybrina's Circle of Mothers healing retreat. Our community has already raised over $10,000. We'll be closing the campaign tomorrow so we can disperse the funds to the Trayvon Martin Foundation. So I encourage you to make your donation today if you've been wanting to do that. If you're finding this episode after the campaign has closed, you can still contribute directly to the foundation. Applications are also open now for the next cohort of the Mother's Quest Virtual Circle. If you're on the threshold of a new chapter in your life, or have been feeling the need for deep connections with like-minded mothers, I hope you'll apply. Last weekend, we closed the most recent cohort of the Mother's Quest Circle, and I was reminded of the power of what's possible when we slow down, press pause on the busyness of our lives, and make the time to be known and know others. I hope you enjoyed this conversation on Anne's podcast. I'm excited to be back in a few short weeks with the start of a new incredible season of conversations. Until then, seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts.
Welcome to MamaFuel, the podcast that fuels every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully sparks a few dreams along the way. I'm Anne Ferguson, Chief Nurturer and Mama Mentor at the Centered Mama Project, and your host for this podcast. I'll be sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with beautiful mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. My name is Anne Ferguson, and I am so delighted to have this moment in your earbuds because today I am interviewing my podcasting big sister in a way. Julie Neal is someone whose podcast creation I came across when I was researching something and had this little tiny dream of maybe doing a podcast, but who was I to do a podcast? And I'd never been on the radio and I didn't know if what I had to say was important and all the things that so many of us let stand in our way when we have a dream. And then I heard Julie Neal's podcast, Mother's Quest. And the penny dropped because she decided to create conversations to help her in her mothering journey and to help all of us. So my podcasting big sister is our guest today. And here in Geneva at nighttime, at the very end of the day, I'm delighted to be peering into Pacific Coast sunshine and saying hello and warm welcome to Julie Neal.
Yay. Hello, Anne. I'm so honored to be here and hearing you say, what the impact has been for you of the Mother's Quest podcast. It means everything. So thank you for reaching out to me. I think we really connected because you took the time to write a review. And I think I was having one of those days where I was wondering, are my conversations reaching anyone? Is it having an impact? And then I read your review and immediately remembered, oh yes, there are other mothers, women also on a quest that are actually hearing these conversations. So thank you for your generosity in reaching out to me.
Oh, well, it was my pleasure. And I didn't realize at the time, not having my own podcast baby, what the impact was. So to anyone who's listening, if you have not heard the Mother's Quest podcast, I urge you, not now, but when you're done listening to this episode, to go onto your favorite podcast listening platform, find Mother's Quest and subscribe because Julie has this massive collection of really impactful, beautiful, true conversations that lead you through a process that I'm excited to lead Julie through today and that culminate in a quest. And it's such a beautiful concept and such a beautiful practical way of looking at motherhood and evolution as women that I really urge you to go and listen to that and leave a review for Julie. And while you're at it, leave a review for MamaFuel as well, because the algorithms love reviews, especially when they're 5-star, 5-star, 5-star. Not that I want to influence you in any direction, but it really makes a huge difference to we podcast hosts because it helps get our podcasts into more mamas' ears. So without any further ado, let's dive in because there's a lot that I have been dreaming of asking you. And we first met online, and then we met at Camp Good Life Project in August of 2018, which at time of recording is 5 months ago. And I had said something in a presentation with Jonathan Fields of Good Life Project, and you came over afterwards and said, hi, I'm Julie Neal. I really think we should talk. And I had this moment of, oh my God, it's you. You've been in my ears a lot.
So it is such a strange experience, isn't it? When you feel like you know someone and then they're there in front of you and you hear their voice. It is a beautiful moment.
Yes. And it's this instant, but slightly lopsided intimacy where you think that you know someone based on the things that they talk about on their podcast or their radio show or their books or whatever it is. People, we all think that we know Elizabeth Gilbert, but we don't know Elizabeth Gilbert. We know her books and her Eat, Pray, Love story and what's been going on in her life, but we don't actually know her. But that it's that instant connection and that recognition of, oh, I hear you and I see you, and you might not know me, but you see me, because what you say reflects so much of what's going on in my heart and in my head. And that's one of the things that makes your conversation so impactful over on Mother's Quest. So really thank you for every one of those conversations as they began and have evolved through activism, through sharing love, through being present and bearing witness. It's really, you continue to inspire. So keep going.
Yes, I'm in it for the long haul. I just love what podcasting has made possible in the ways that it has enriched my life. And it is kind of crazy. Not too long ago, I passed a big milestone of over 50 episodes. And I did have that feeling of like, I thought I just started this not long ago and realized I've been doing this for 2 years and there's a whole body of work beneath me now.
Yeah.
So it's been a great experience so far, and I know I will just continue to evolve and deepen and have incredible experiences, being able to connect in an intimate, reflective way with so many amazing women. So what a gift this podcasting vehicle is for us.
I know, it's so juicy and so good. So for those of our listeners who have not yet binge listened to Mother's Quest, as they will shortly be doing, tell us about your journey into motherhood, because it wasn't a smooth and seamless ride, was it?
It wasn't. I was one of those people that always wanted to be a mom. And, my marriage, finding my partner, was a pretty seamless experience. We met when I was 19 at UCLA in college.
Whoa.
And, we had a couple stops and starts, but really, I knew fairly early in my life that he was going to be my life partner. We've been married for over 20 years now. So that part was smoother sailing. But when we decided we were ready to have a child, it didn't come easily, even though we were ready to join the club. So I had about 3 years of infertility with my first son. And that did start me on, one of my first journeys, which ended up helping me a lot later on, of really uncovering what could be maybe underneath the infertility. I found someone who's been an incredible guide in my life, Dr. Angela Wu, who's a Chinese medicine and fertility specialist in San Francisco. And within about, I think it was about 3 months of meeting with her, changing my diet, changing my lifestyle, reducing stress, making all of these changes in my internal landscape, I ended up getting pregnant. So, it was a little bit of a rocky start, but then we had a fairly easy pregnancy, and we were just so thrilled to be parents and have our guy, Ryan.
And he was an amazing little guy. And I think all the more so for parents who have had low fertility or infertility struggles or a journey. When the baby arrives, it's somehow, I think, that much more thrilling and exciting and a relief, because you've had all of these, especially if you've had procedures or you've had IVF or whatever it is that the path that you have chosen or that's been available to you, that baby comes, and then you think, right, that's it. The baby's here. I did it. We did it. Yes, we're parents. That's it. And then
the hard part's behind us.
Right?
Yeah.
So the struggle's over. And then
exactly. We had a pretty blissful, I would say, first year, and Ryan was a pretty easy baby. Although actually looking back, we did have all these funny things. He had to wear a helmet because his head was a little bit slanted from lying on his side, too much, or some issues with reflux. So there were some bumps in the road, but everything felt easily surmountable. And then when he was about 18 months old, we realized that he was not developing typically, and ended up seeking support and found out that he
was going to need quite a lot of early intervention. And so the first 3 to 4 years of his life were very much focused on intensive intervention, speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral therapy, and really trying to help him just reach his fullest potential. But it absolutely tested us in a lot of ways. And it was our first introduction to something I'm learning over and over again in parenthood about, kind of letting go of control and really trying to honor your child for who they are. And remembering that you can't control the outcome, but just trying to do everything you can, again, to support them to reach their fullest potential, whatever that is.
Oh, so true. And as a mama of a differently wired daughter, 2 differently wired kids, one twice gifted and the other just gifted out of the universe. Just gifted. I say that like it's not, like it's negligible. It's not. But we had a stab at recording this podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we had lots of technical issues. So we've redone it. And at the time, I had asked you a question about how, did you find that isolating? And you had a really beautiful response. And I was coming at it from this sort of, from our experience, which was of being sort of lost in the woods, groping around for some sort of hope and solace because the support just wasn't that available here in the system. Switzerland has a long road to go before it catches up to Anglophone speaking countries where the support around learning differences seems to be just that much more vast. But you had a really life affirming and community building experience, didn't you, around your little guy's wiring? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely do resonate with this idea that that it can be really overwhelming, that there's no one clear path, that it's not something that everybody talks about. I think you may also know Deborah Reber, who has this incredible podcast and community called Tilt Parenting.
I totally don't.
You should definitely listen to that episode and then go explore her podcast, which is just incredible. But she has this manifesto and she writes about how and why she started Tilt is so that parents don't feel like they're alone, and also that they can try to claim a more positive perspective about their differently wired child. But I was also, so I did go through those emotions, but I was also so fortunate that we did have access to resources. Ryan qualified for quite a lot of support. And also I am a researcher by nature and resourceful. My career at the time was in fund development and community building. And so I just did what I know how to do, which is, clear the decks, dive in deep into research, talk to every single person I could think to talk to, and, just find my own way, but not without guides. And in fact, I might have mentioned the story to you that there was one woman who, she called herself a rescue angel in an organization at the time, who I remember being the first mom I met with whose child was dealing with some similar things. And we met at a Starbucks, and she brought this huge binder. And I think I probably cried through the first 15 minutes. But then she really did light the way for me. She told me about, these are the best OTs, and go to the speech therapist, and this is what's working for us, and, think about this approach. And so fairly immediately I did get a ton of support and have found really incredible practitioners, parents, community along the way. And, Ryan is thriving. He's now 15 in high school, playing high school basketball. He's also twice exceptional, so he's gifted as well. And he's doing mock trial. And, so we've had the experience of being able to see how, giving him all of these supports has really enabled him to be quite, a happy person. And yet he still also has unique challenges that we're continuing to kind of meet. And we approach it the same way we did when he was younger. Okay, what's happening here? What can we learn? Who can we reach out to help us? And the good thing is that he has learned that skill too. And he's quite self-aware and really open to receiving help, which is so important.
So important. So you didn't stop there though. Ryan has a brother.
Right. So another beautiful thing, like in the same way I always knew I wanted to be a mother, Ryan always wanted to be a brother. He was one of those kids that, like, even at age 2, loved babies. And as soon as he could talk, he was asking for a sibling. And at first we weren't quite ready because we had our hands full. But when he was about 3 or 4, we started trying to get pregnant again. And we ended up having 5+ years of infertility before we were finally able to, get pregnant and have our youngest, Jacob, who is now about 6.5. So, in motherhood in general, and I, of course, talk about this in my first episode of the podcast where I talk about why I created Mother's Quest, I felt like I had a very transformative motherhood journey where, kind of again and again, things didn't necessarily go the way I would have chosen or expected, but we had to find our way. And, just really grateful that we have had the experience of being able to have 2 amazing children. And I learned so much from them. It's this reciprocal relationship where we're helping them to grow and shaping them, but then they do the same for us.
You told me a story when we spoke last time about that you were going to give a presentation, and you asked your son, your little guy who had just given a presentation at school, what if he had any advice for you. And he said something, I can't remember the detail, but he had said something really sweet to you before that. Do you remember that story?
Yes. I had been invited to do a live interview with one of my previous podcast guests, Elizabeth Cronus McLaughlin. And I was a little nervous about it. I hadn't done it before. And we had just come from one of our amazing summer camp experiences. We go every year to this alumni family camp called UCLA Bruin Woods.
Amazing.
And so Jake was in the talent show. And I asked him, what was your, do you have some words of wisdom for me? How was that for you? What did you figure out? And he had these really amazing practical things, like have at least one person in the audience that you can look to for support. I looked at you and Dad. Practice, make sure you're ready for it. And then he said something like, and then just don't worry about it. He was basically saying, like, at a certain point, you have to just let go.
Hello, Mama.
Yeah, so amazing words of wisdom. And I love to do that. I ask my children questions about whatever I'm grappling with all the time. And it's this like beautiful, again, reciprocal gift, because I think it lets them into seeing that we don't have it all figured out, we're not all perfect, that we value what they have to share with us. And then truly they have really amazing perspective. So I love to do that.
That's so beautiful. And it's something that I almost feel like I certainly need, on some level, I feel like I need permission to do that, because I have this really, really deep wiring that I, as the parent, should know. I am, the director, and I'm very, very good at organizing. I'm extremely good at federating. I'm great at, putting all the details together, making sure everything's going harmoniously, event management, communication, PR. In my former career, it's, client service. I'm on it. I can, be the orchestra leader. And it is, I do it more now than I did when they were younger, but I very seldom feel uninhibited in saying to them, like, I really don't know what to do about this. What do you think? I do it, but it's not without still that catch of inhibition of like, I should, am I making it unstable for them because it's clear that, like, I don't know what's going on here either. Like I'm looking around and waiting for the grownups to show up. Oh wait, that's me. Right. And so on the one hand, we frequently have conversations like that where I'll say to the kids, I shouldn't have spoken in that way, or that reaction isn't actually in line with how I really feel, or whatever the circumstance is. And I find that whenever I can do that, it enriches the relationship so much. So what you're saying about having that really reciprocal relationship of like, being able to ask them and tell them what you're grappling with is something that I think many parents, particularly those of us who have been raised in, that sort of mother and father know best way, it may be just useful to remind ourselves of that on occasion, like that it's okay to say to your kids, I don't know, or can you help me figure this out? Or, hey, I'm kind of not sure about how to do this, or this is what I'm sensing in our house. This is the vibe I'm picking up. How does it feel to you? Like, let's talk about this. Because then it becomes mutual, doesn't it? There's a mutuality that starts to come into play.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not only okay, but it's just like such a really amazing, generous thing to do. And I'm thinking of, you and I both had Christina Kuzmich on the podcast. And there's an episode where I was feeling really nervous about interviewing her because she has such a big following.
I know.
I remember at bedtime talking to my oldest and saying, Ryan, I'm about to do this and I'm just not sure. And he said, Mom, remember, she's not more than you. She may have more, followers or more years of experience, but she's not more than you. And I ended up sharing that story with Christina, and she said it was like one of the most amazing things that she heard, and she would always remember it. And so when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you get so much, but then also like you have the ability to share with others that story. And I know that story has helped a lot of other people that have listened to it.
Okay, so let's get into the juicy questions, because one of the things, or the way that you structured your podcast that I found so fascinating as a podcaster curious being, was that you have a set of pillars. You have these pillars that you build your podcast on, and it is all around living your most epic life. And you use each of the letters of the word epic to guide your questions and conversations with the women that you have on your podcast. So I would love to know, first of all, how did that come to be? How did that structure come into being? Why do you ask those questions, and tell us what the questions are?
Yes. Well, it's funny that you should mention Elizabeth Gilbert, because she played a really important part in my journey. I went to a writing workshop of hers called Big Magic.
Oh, God. And, I'm so jealous.
Well, I know. It was absolutely amazing and magical. And it was one of those very random things where it was out of character for me to do what I did, which is that it was my birthday, my 44th birthday, and I saw there was this workshop, and I bought a ticket to go to this all-day thing in Napa by myself. I just invested in this thing for myself, and it wasn't something I had been doing in the past. And while I was there, we did a lot of things, a lot of writing, but one of the prompts was to write a letter of permission to yourself to live the life you want to live and to live a creative life. And I realized a year later, as I was recording my introductory podcast episode and launching Mother's Quest as a 45th birthday present to myself, that the seeds of living that kind of epic life where you're really going after your dreams were planted at that workshop with me writing that letter a year before.
All the goosebumps.
And, I think that when I also heard Elizabeth in an interview with Oprah Winfrey talking about the hero's journey and about Joseph Campbell, who's done all this research about the hero's journey and how these are iconic stories that show up in our literature and in our movies. And, so she has really played kind of a pivotal part for me. And epic has this connotation of pursuing your dreams, answering the call, living the life that I always like to say when you're maybe a grandparent and sitting and telling your grandchildren stories. There's stories about a life that was filled with all the things that mattered most to you, and where you pursued the things that mattered, even if it was something that felt scary or out of your comfort zone, and that you really just didn't let fear stop you from doing the things that matter. So EPIC has that connotation. And then it also is an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us live that life when we're raising our children. And that part kind of came out seamlessly. It was actually Jonathan Fields and working on something called Manifesto Code with him, which got this whole EPIC framework clarified for me. And I had been wrestling with it all day and had been on the phone and in the Facebook group kind of talking about what it was I was trying to achieve with Mother's Quest. And I finally realized, no, it's not a balanced life. It's not a stress-free life. It's not just a good life, although a good life is great. But for me, it really was this epic life. And then I sat down at midnight, because I'm a night owl, with a napkin and a pen at my kitchen table and just like wrote epic and thought, like, could it also capture all the things I feel like I'm always on a quest for, that I'm always trying to figure out on this journey? And it just literally flowed out within 2 minutes. E, engaged mindfully with my children. P, passionate, purposeful, that work that we do in the world beyond our family. I, invested in ourselves, continuing to, take care of ourselves and support our own growth and learning and the things that bring us joy. And then C is connected to a strong support network so that we realize we don't have to be on this journey alone. That's what it all stands for. And those guideposts have become absolutely the framework for all of my interviews, but it's also the framework for all of the coaching work that I do, whether that's one-on-one or in circles. It's something I use as part of my daily practice, and some tools I've created. So it really is the foundation for everything in Mother's Quest.
I love it. I love it. And what you do in your podcast is that you ask your guests how each of these guideposts show up in their lives. So I would love, on behalf of everyone who's ever listened to your podcast and loved it, to turn the tables. Ooh. And you said that you were willing for us to do this. So I'm super excited for us to learn how each of these guideposts shows up in your life. So let's start with E.
So in terms of engaging mindfully with my children, I did touch already on something that I think has been really key and powerful for us, which is that I do hold this belief that we both have something to learn and to give to one another, and really hold it as a reciprocal relationship. And I engage in dialogue. I happen to, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, but I happen to have 2 very verbal, articulate boys, very self-aware. So we have conversations all the time about how we're feeling and what we want and what's working and what's not working. And as I mentioned, when there are things happening in my own life that I'm grappling with, I share with them and ask them for their ideas and their feedback. I also engage them in a lot of experiences. Especially since I started Mother's Quest, the reality is that there's part of me that now gets a little bit more distracted maybe than I would have been. I'm in the online space, and I like so many other moms I know, I struggle with wanting to check this post or send a message to someone.
Oh yeah.
And so that, I would say, is, one way in which my engagement with them has been challenging, and I'm working on that. But on the other hand, there have been so many rich experiences that they've had as a result of me living my epic life. I've taken them with me to the Women's March. I mentioned that live interview that I did. I had my youngest, Jacob, giving me advice, and then my oldest came and watched the interview and actually asked a really powerful question, stood up and asked Elizabeth a question, and then we got to talk about what he learned from hearing Elizabeth talk about politics and the resistance. And Kate Schatz is another amazing author. She's the author of the Rad Women series of books for children. And I brought my little guy with me to her book signing and book opening, and he got a chance to talk with her and to see some of the girls she highlighted in her book share about what they're doing to change the world. And, so I try to engage them in meaningful experiences and in meaningful conversation all the time. And sometimes I talk specifically about things that have come up in interviews. And my oldest, one of my favorite episodes of all time is actually with Ryan. On his 13th birthday, we chose not to have him go to school, and he and I went on a milestone hike which is something I do for myself and with my clients, and reflected on his first 13 years of his life and my first 13 years of motherhood. And then we went to lunch in San Francisco, went to an official recording studio, and recorded an episode where we captured our reflections of what came up for us on our hike.
Oh,
so
fun.
Yes, if you haven't listened to that one yet, it's really a special one. So I just am constantly thinking about unique ways to really connect at a deep level with my boys and involve them in my life. And then, of course, I'm quite involved in theirs, going to basketball games. And my youngest, I just signed him up to be in a play. He's going to be young Shrek.
Oh, how fun.
So I love, being present and there for them as they're experimenting with all these things in their life.
So beautiful. Okay. So next is P, which is passionate and purposeful, right? So
passionate and purposeful.
How does that show up in your life?
So, I'm grateful that I feel like, straight out of college, I've done meaningful work for 20 plus years. I was in youth development, community building, and it was through that I came to coaching, because in the job where I was for 15 years at Alternatives in Action, there was this deep commitment for the adults that were supporting young people to also be doing the same kind of growing and connection and personal development that we were asking of the young people, with this idea that if we're asking them to learn and grow, the adults need to be mirroring that for them. And I'm sure that's also impacted a lot of my parenting and the things I just discussed in that first guidepost. But I also felt for years like I wasn't fully using my gifts in the way where I could make the most impact. And that's really why Mother's Quest has been such a special experience for me, because I feel like I'm able to, through Mother's Quest, really bring forward so many of my my strengths in unique ways. And that I get to be both someone who has gifts to share, and to coach and support other women and create space for reflection. But also I get to be a learner and to be open and transparent about that in a way that invites other people to learn through my experience. So it's this unique combination. And I feel like this is the first time in my life where I'm like really in the sweet spot of how I can make an impact. And it's funny because there's this thread of Good Life Project, which is how you and I are connected, that has come up a few times. Jonathan Fields has just come out with this thing called Spark Type. And I know that you have taken it as well, because I have the same type. But when I got my results from that, and it's a free assessment that anyone can take, so maybe we could put the link in for
absolutely.
I found out that you have a primary and a secondary, and I was a primary advisor, which is very much like a coach. But my secondary was Maven, which is about a learner, lifelong learner. And so it made perfect sense. It was like these pieces of the puzzle coming together of who I've always been all my life, but why I feel like right now I am making my most purposeful impact.
Yes. And in fact, funny you should mention the Sparketype, because I sent the link to my husband, and I will link it in the show notes, for him to do the Sparketype, because I was pretty sure that he's a maker scientist. Maybe not in that order, maybe scientist maker. And so he did the Sparketype today, and he sent it to me, and I was like, did you give that a lot of thought? Like, did you answer that thoughtfully, or did you just answer it? And he said, no, I gave it a lot of thought. And his came back as a Maven maker.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, there are 10 Sparketypes, and it's really fun to go and look at what it is that actually gets you sparked up, so that you can to help you find your passion and purpose, which spark and passion and purpose aren't the same thing. And what's super interesting about that assessment, because it's all around your life's work, is how you can find ways to fit any of the 10 Sparketypes in any role. Like a surgeon can be a maker, can be a scientist, can be an advisor, can be a maven, can be whatever, whatever the different archetype is that fits into it. There are different ways of approaching the same role. So slight aside, but it was really, really fun. And to have him come back and say, this is what came up, I was like, ooh, we're gonna have some juicy conversations about that. And I was thinking actually about doing it with the kids too, even though they're young, but it would be really interesting to do it with them now. And then if it's still available and, in 10 years, then to do it again in 10 years and see if there's been a movement and see how it works. But it's super, super interesting, conversation provoking stuff, that archetype. So I'm glad.
Well, you've now inspired me. I'm going to definitely do it with Ryan. Jake might be a little too young, but Ryan and I did. We hired Alethea Chang Fitzpatrick, who is another one of my podcast guests. She is a Myers-Briggs specialist.
Yeah.
And she had us do the Myers-Briggs test and then share our results with one another. And we realized that we were incredibly similar, which we weren't surprised about. And we're also almost the polar opposite of my husband.
Interesting.
So it is very illuminating to do that, give yourself a chance to have that introspection and then see what meaning you want to make of it in your life.
And it's back to that maven learner, right? Like that is what it's all about. Learning for the sake of learning and the joy of like getting every single bit of your brain lit up and fizzing. I remember going to yoga teacher training. The first time I did a month-long yoga teacher training, I felt like the atoms in my brain were moving in a different way and a different speed. And the only time I have felt like that since is every time I go away and do a yoga teacher training that's very focused on anatomy, that's very focused on yoga therapy. And I'm just like, because I think it really sparks, like that's the spark, that's the thing. So for anyone who's listening and curious about that, that's a very helpful aside that it's so fun and it's such a good conversation starter. So let's come back, let's circle back. So we've talked about E, the first guidepost, engaging mindfully with your children. P, which is passionate and purposeful. And I was listening to you so intently that I forgot to write down and I never remember what I So remind me, I want to say it's intentional, but I'm not sure if that's right.
Before we move off of P, there's something else I want to say about my impact lately. And you kind of referenced this at the beginning. Feels important to name, which is that, alongside living my epic life, I've also been on a journey to step into more social activism. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure some of that is because, it was around when Trump was elected and the Women's March happened. But it is another place. It's occurring to me now because we just talked about our spark type. That I have been able to step into this work, which has felt like I don't really know what I'm doing or that I'm going to make a mistake because I've been able to hold a growth mindset and to be in a learning mode. So one of the first episodes I did before I started doing some work around anti-racism and advocating against police brutality and for more police accountability was an episode with an inclusion specialist named Nicole Lee. And like the biggest gift she gave me in stepping into that work was to invite me to hold a growth mindset. She talked about how we encourage our kids to hold a growth mindset and we talk about it in their education, that like, it's okay to not know what you're doing. It's okay to, make a mistake and learn from it and then try to do better next time. And so that has really been a powerful guiding light for me and, work I continue to feel really passionate about doing, to use my voice and my privilege to shine a light on issues. Even if I, to move out of that feeling of being paralyzed or to think that the problem is too big or who am I to think I can make a difference at all. And to just like take some steps, like whatever the next right steps seem to be. And the podcast has been a powerful platform for me to do that I minimally can use my gift of creating space for dialogue and conversation to bring on some incredible women whose stories, like Sybrina Fulton, Trayvon Martin's mother, which was the most recent episode I did, related to this. So that's a commitment and a place I feel like I'm continuing to evolve in terms of my passion and purpose.
And that's a really beautiful evolution in two places I want to go with that. One is naming that we hear over and over in the online space, if we have a mentor, or if we see other people who are doing, similar things to us, that you can think yourself into nothing. Like you can think and think and think and think and think, but it's not until you start actually doing that you start to see the road opening up in front of you. So it's not, you don't see the path until you start walking. You don't feel the parachute until you jump. You don't, whatever the image is that connects to people, you will not see the way if you just sit on your exercise ball like I am right now, or in your chair, or, you stand and ruminate. Ruminating ain't going to get you nowhere if you don't do anything with it. And so it's been really interesting to see that you have had this activism piece, but I feel that it's coming through much more strongly. And in fact, with Trayvon Martin's mother, you actually did a GoFundMe
campaign.
I'm tired. GoFundMe campaign. And you were raising money to help send mothers who have lost their children to gun violence to an amazing camp that she created. Is that something that we can still support, that people can still contribute to?
Yeah, so I'm not sure when this episode's coming out, but you're exactly right. I created, when I decided I wanted to use podcasting as a platform for this work, I created an initiative called Women Podcasters in Solidarity. Mm-hmm. And I figured if I'm doing this, I could invite other women podcasters to be a part. And the first season, the focus was on anti-racism and police brutality. And I interviewed the co-founder of Mothers Against Police Brutality. And I did raise money towards that organization. So sort of the seeds of it happened in the first season of the initiative. But, as everything, it's sort of growing and evolving. And so the second season, our focus was on the intersectional impact of gun violence on our communities. And this episode with Sybrina Fulton made so much sense, and kind of had some of the threads from the first season around anti-racism, because of the racial profiling, obviously, that impacted Trayvon Martin. So this time around, we just were a little bit more formal and did a GoFundMe campaign. And at this point, we've raised over $8,000 on the GoFundMe, but there are a number of mothers in my community that have contributed directly, not using the GoFundMe. So I think we're probably close to raising around $10,000, but I have a goal of $15,000. And it is to support Circle of Mothers, which is Sybrina basically had a dream and woke up one morning, and she had this incredibly clear vision of the support she wanted to provide to other mothers who lost a child in the way that she did, so that she could provide what she felt like was not there for her when she lost Trayvon. Mm-hmm. So she's now been doing it for a number of years, and just bringing together in this really beautiful way in a healing retreat mothers from all over the country that have lost children. So it feels like just an honor and a responsibility to direct some resources to that work that she's doing. And she also invited me on the episode to come and be an ambassador, to be a mother who can support the other mothers. So I'm planning on doing that in May. So yes, absolutely. I would love for listeners to bear witness to her story and to learn from her by listening to that episode. And it's it is powerful and sad and hard to listen to in parts, but it also is remarkably an inspiring conversation, and kind of an uplifting one in some surprising ways. So I hope people will listen, and if you can contribute, any gift is meaningful, and it goes towards helping to get some mothers who wouldn't otherwise be able to get to the retreat. So sponsoring those mothers.
Yeah, it's so meaningful. And at time of recording, it is late on the 28th of January. And if I can get my amazing podcast editor to get his hands on our conversation, we may publish tomorrow. So we'll see.
Oh, that would be perfect.
He's on the east coast of Canada. So we'll see how the podcast wends its way through the ethers and then back this way so that I can publish it tomorrow. So
and I should say that Trayvon Martin's birthday is coming up. Sybrina does like a peace march in Florida. And in my mind, I'm really holding that as I'd really like us to hit our goal of 15,000, in time to honor his birthday.
That would be amazing. Well, I will put the link to that episode of the conversation that you had with Sybrina, and I will also link to the GoFundMe campaign so that anyone listening who feels moved to contribute, as the saying goes in the UK, every little helps, and anything that you can contribute will help to bring these grieving mothers into a place of a circle of support and love. And I really honor your using this platform that you've created over the last 50 episodes to give voice to that and to spread the message more broadly. I really admire that. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for amplifying it.
My pleasure. Okay, so let's go back. We've done E. We've done P.
I. So you want the reminder, what is I? So I stands for invested.
I was like
ourselves.
Intentional, which is kind of invested. Thank you.
Yes. So that encompasses, all of the self-care practices, our commitment to our own growth and learning, creating space in our lives for the things that do bring us joy. And it's something that I think, in all the interviews I've had, most of the people I interview say they struggle the most with I. There have definitely been a few people that are like, I'm just so good at this and I make the time for myself. But a lot of people, it's hard as a mom and you want to be there for your kids and you want to be doing great work in the world. And sometimes caring for yourself is the first thing to go.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing quest to prioritize our own well-being and our own growth and our own dreams alongside all the other things that matter.
Particularly so, everyone has different circumstances, right? But I think of parents who are solo parenting, which is the case certainly in our house. Most of the time I'm solo parenting and there's no family around. So the support network is what I have created, but it's not, it's not the same as having parents down the road. And parents who have kids who are sick, or parents who have kids who are differently wired, or who have something that in any way takes us a little bit off the path, the sort of straight and narrow road that we think we're going to be on once we become parents, which we all learn is just not real. But whatever diversion may occur, feels like it makes it that much harder to protect that space and to really hold those sacred promises to ourselves for time for exercise and time for rest and time for refueling. It's what this whole podcast is about, right? It's what my whole work is about with MamaFuel, is to provide fuel for every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, because we forget. And then the resentment kicks in, and then the frustration kicks in, and then the relationships start getting damaged because we aren't making time to invest in ourselves. So how do you, in that context of, your everyday life, which is incredibly rich and beautiful and filled with exceptional beings all the time, and also in the middle of all of those things, you were you before, and you're still you today with the enriching experience of being a mama. How do you invest in yourself? You went to listen to Elizabeth Gilbert on your 44th birthday. I love that. Yeah. And you said it was a departure. You said it wasn't something you would have normally done. So has the needle moved on that? Are you still struggling to?
It has. I think that, in claiming my epic life, it meant also claiming opportunity, saying yes to investing in myself, investing in opportunities. Camp GLP was another one of those things that it was on my bucket list for years. And I said, I'll go next year. I think I was listening to a podcast with Jonathan at the time. I had this gut feeling of I thought maybe I was supposed to go. And then his voice was literally in my ear saying, if you've been waiting to go to Camp GLP, don't wait anymore. This is our last year. Yeah. So I'm obviously incredibly privileged that I have the ability to do some of these things. I have a partner who's very supportive, who champions me all the time. I've been able to say yes to more of these opportunities, and also find ways to build in practices into my daily life. So another thing that has come alongside this 2 years of Mother's Quest has been a commitment to a morning practice. I'm so grateful I had Lindsay McCarthy on the podcast, who's the author of the Miracle Morning for Parents and Families, who has been able to shine more light on that. So I found that even if it's only 5 or 6 minutes in the morning, where I give myself some space to, I have a prayer that I sing, a Jewish prayer called Moda Ani. It's just a really beautiful sentiment about welcoming the day. I do some sun salutations out on my deck. I notice the minute I walk outside onto the deck and just have the fresh air and look at the sky, I immediately feel different. I do a scan every morning, just kind of have a few minutes of silence, and I think about each of the guideposts and sort of where I am on a scale from 0 to 10. I do a little visualization about how I want my day to go, do a little bit of writing. Sometimes I read. I like to I have so many inspirational books. I finally had to actually bring a bookshelf into my room because the pile by my bed got too big. I love to pull a book off the shelf and literally flip to a page and just see what's there for me that day. And so I find that when I do those things, and I don't do it every day, I'm not perfect, but I have had a real consistent commitment to it. And it really helps me start my day more intentionally and to kind of feed my own self a little bit before I go get my kids to school and do whatever else I have planned. So continually looking for those places to just say yes to myself, to experiences for myself, and to self-care practices like that are, what has been helping me.
So good. And that resonates so much. And it's helpful probably for anyone who's listening to know that it doesn't have to be long and complicated, because I hear from many women that, a bit of a sigh and an eye roll about, it's easy for you to say that you can do a morning practice because your kids are bigger, or it's easy for you to say because your partner's around, or it's easy for you to say because you're not working, or da-da-da. But it's as complicated as you make it. And one of the things that I talk about in the Self-Love-a-thon, which is a 40-day self-love nurture fest, basically, that I run 3 times a year. And we're doing it at time of recording. We're halfway through right now. One of the things I say is, like, when you reclaim your mornings, it can literally be 60 seconds. The alarm goes off. You lie in your bed, you stretch and take 3 deep breaths. Give yourself a hug, say, I love you, and then gently get out of bed. And like, you've reclaimed part of your morning instead of just the alarm going off and you literally like hurl yourself out of bed, that kind of lurching forward, which
heart racing,
heart racing, terrible for your cervical spine. But loads of yoga therapist training is like, no, don't roll over onto your side, gently help yourself up, just like you did when you were pregnant. Like, that's how you should be getting out of bed, just to be easing into your day. But that can be your devotion to yourself, is something that's short and easy. And it can also extend. This morning was an exceptional morning. I got up, did all of my practices, and then had, 25 minutes of meditation, and then some yoga, and then some journaling. And it was an extraordinary morning, and isn't normally the way that things proceed. But, it's about the flexibility and the knowing of what is happening and what's realistic, and just kind of protecting the time and committing to that sacred practice, and yet allowing yourself the grace to flow with what is that day. A child who's sick, or maybe you just missed the alarm that morning, or whatever it is, but giving yourself the permission to just flow imperfectly in the ease and the grace. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so that brings us to the final guidepost. Tell us how that shows in your life.
C, connected to a strong support network. This is all about back to the the hero's journey. In the typical hero's journey, it's kind of this like harrowing journey where like a few guides do appear, but the hero is really kind of like on his own. And my very first podcast guest, Navjeet Kandola, she was one of the first people I spoke to when I had this idea for Mother's Quest, and told her, I want to say yes to the hero's journey. And she really encouraged me. She was like, are you sure that's the frame you want? She really encouraged me to claim a journey that was what I wanted it to be. And she invited me to think about, what if it didn't have to feel harrowing? What if you didn't need to be alone? And that really has set the tone for my whole experience. It's why I bring all these women on as guides. It's why I have a Facebook community that has grown from like a few of my family and friends to now about 600 people from all over the world. And this really like nurturing, positive, connected kind of community where we realize that we all have something we can share with one another. We all have something to learn. We don't have to figure it out by ourselves. I absolutely love being in circle with other women.
Yes.
It is something that I had just really powerful experiences of even before I created Mother's Quest. And it's why my signature offering is this Mother's Quest circle. And I've now that I've been running a few of the circles, and I'm doing one now. I had women in my home just on Saturday this weekend. I get to see those connections form and then how they grow, you know, beyond just the cycle of our circle. You know, there's my first virtual circle. A lot of those women are on a Voxer channel and they're talking to each other multiple times a day, making plans to see one another. So I just love building connections and community. Of course, my relationship with my family is foundational. I have an incredible partner in my husband, Chris. Lifelong friends, you know, women that were in my wedding, many of whom were my oldest friend, Rachel Winter, who I did a podcast episode with. She's the producer of the Dallas Buyers Club. We've been friends since we were 5.
Amazing.
Lives. So, you know, I just think drawing on these deep connections and relationships from our past, but then the ones that we're creating today, and just realizing that you don't need to hold things by yourself, and you know, just building opportunity and making time for being in authentic connection with one another. It's what I am really committed to.
And it's so life-giving, and giving yourself the permission to be vulnerable enough to step into those circles, particularly if you haven't always had the most positive experiences of stepping into circle with other women, be it from, you know, the playground when you were 6, or, you know, the high school locker room, or whatever it may be. That I feel like we are at this phase in our lives now, because I'm about to turn 45 in April. And that we're at this phase in our lives where we are perhaps courageous enough, perhaps cracked open enough by life and by mothering and by just time, you know, time on this planet that shows us that being impenetrable isn't healthy, and that being an island isn't healthy, and that the more you can step into those circles, the more strength you can have when those circles are chosen carefully, and when you are discerning about where you place your cracked, vulnerable, beautiful self. And when you find the right place. And Good Life Project was, for me, same as you. I have it on my vision board. It's right there on Camp GLP. It's right there. I've been listening. I could show you on my vision board. It was there. And for the summer of 2018, and I had the same experience as you, where I had been wanting to go to Camp GLP for 3 years. And something made me book it. I think I booked it in January or something crazy. I was like, oh my God, I want to make sure they're going to run out of spots, you know? So I booked this thing and organized my whole family's summer, like 7 weeks around it, because we're in Switzerland. So it was this big, you know, the culmination point of the summer for me. It was my like reward and break. And I remember walking into that camp and being I was so ready for it. And I was so overwhelmed by the number of people who were so open, men and women, who were so open and so loving and so curious and accepting and encouraging and uplifting, that my nervous system needed a reset, because it was 450 odd people who were all plugged into that same vibe. And it was too much initially, until I've sort of, you know, we all found our spaces and people we connected with, and you connected with who you did and you didn't with who you didn't. But yeah, same as you, that really resonates with me, that commitment to stepping into circle and then creating circle. Because if you have that gift, and I think you and I are very similar in that way, in that we have that gift of creating a safe space and of holding that safe space for other people that lets them put down their hearts and lets them drop the pretense and the protection and just take everything that's in their heart and on their shoulders and just lay it down without needing it fixed or needing it changed in any way. And it's one of the things that I have come to love the most about the MamaFuel Sisterhood, which I'm about to open the doors to at time of recording.
So exciting.
In February. Yeah. I launched it in October. And so I have a founding circle of members who are extraordinary. And they have said to me, these women who hold space for other women who have come to this circle to have it be their space, that I feel so safe here, that I know that I can go out and do things that scare me. I know that I can go out and stretch beyond what's comfortable because you've made it safe for me to be me here. And that means it's safe for me to be me elsewhere. And that is just like, I mean, I'm almost in tears just saying that back to you. It's been extraordinary in that the privilege of holding that space, as you said, I could feel it from you when you said that you had these women in your home on the weekend, that privilege of seeing those connections and of seeing that those sparks we were talking about earlier really illuminate from one person to the other, and that energy be shared is like nothing else. So yeah, I totally hear you, and I honor you for both creating it for yourself and creating it for other people, because it's really important work.
Thank you. And I'm so excited for you, and right back at you about the space you're creating for moms. It's clearly already making an impact, and I know that you'll just be bringing in more people that are seeking the kind of community that you're building.
Well, I thank you, and I am very excited to open the doors to that. I'm also conscious that you need to open a door and walk through it to go pick up your son from school in a couple minutes. So I would love for you to share one question really quickly, and then to share where you where people can find you. I'll link all over the place in the show notes, but we can still give that information. But my final question for you is, where do you get your MamaFuel?
I think honestly, and the reason why the E.P.I.C framework is so meaningful to me is my fuel really comes from creating space to press pause, to be in reflection, to be in conversation, to be in community around all the things that matter most. And for me, it's those E.P.I.C guideposts. So that's what feeds me, fuels me. I feel so blessed to be able to know what matters and to be in so much authentic relationship with other people around all these things, to have found so many other like-minded mothers on a quest that also care about these things and want to be in conversation and community around them. So these days, that's what it is. It's those 4 guideposts and making the space and time and investing in them.
What a beautiful way to live an aligned, sparked life, right? So good.
Absolutely.
Julie, I could not be more delighted to have had you on, and as ever could talk to you for hours, but I want to honor your time with your little guy so that you can go and collect him. And thank you from the depths of my heart for your inspiration and your presence and your space holding that has allowed the MamaFuel podcast to see the light of day, because you inspired me to know that it was possible. And for all of the work that you do and the activism that you are supporting. I really honor you and send you so much love and wish you a gorgeous day.
Thank you, Anne. This is such a pleasure. I'm so grateful for this time with you and love that we are in community with one another.
Yes, me too. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Julie Neal of Mother's Quest as much as I did. We were a little hasty closing off at the end because Julie had to run off and get her youngest son. So I wanted to make sure that you knew where to find her. All of this will be in the show notes. But if you're listening and that's an easier thing to do than to skim through the show notes, you can head to facebook.com/Mother's Quest to find Julie's group, or go to mothersquest.com. And if you want to find Julie on Instagram, then you will find her there under the handle Mother's Quest Pod. I will put all of this in the show notes, and I would love for you to come into our Facebook group And you can get there by searching Facebook for MamaFuel.me, all one word. And come in and tell us what the biggest takeaway was for you. I really love this conversation. I hope you did too, and I'll chat with you soon. Bye for now. That's it for this episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. You can join that totally free by going to www.thecenteredmamaproject.com/Facebook. Or just go to Facebook and type facebook.com/mamafuel.me or just search mamafuel.me and you'll find us there. Make sure you say hi when you get in there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little bit of Mama Fuel, I would love for you to share this episode and to rate it and leave a review. That will help us get this episode into more mamas' ears, and for that, I will be eternally grateful. Every comment helps, and it is always such a delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day. Love your people. Honor your gifts. Until next time.